Well, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone tuning in from around the world for this third and final online discussion as part of the Water Cities of the Future series. The title for this session is The Art of the Possible Digital Developments. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water, and I'll be the host for the next 60 minutes. So a statistic we've been using throughout the series is that by 2050, 7 out of 10 people are expected to live in cities. So let's just think about that. 7 out of every 10 people will live in cities. And as cities continue to grow, so does their exposure to climate and disaster risk. Rapid urbanization inevitably will bring additional infrastructure challenges, particularly on water. So why the art of the possible? Well, we want to conclude this series, I think, by thinking big, but also positively as well. And I think it's very easy when it comes to the topic of digital and AI to maybe think a bit pessimistically about the future, especially given recent political events, but also about how AI could potentially become unthinkably powerful to replace people, jobs, and purpose. Yet, there's a much more positive, optimistic future and a reality that lies ahead. So if we can truly harness the latest digital innovations coupled with progressive leadership on strategy and policy, what could be possible? And we know there are many examples of cities getting it right, of integrating nature-based solutions as well as digital solutions. And there's a great global network of success stories, often implemented and carried out independently from each other. So we need to make sure that we share these stories and we connect the dots on these key learnings as well. So today we're going to be addressing questions such as, what role will digitalization and AI play in ensuring cities can be built to be more livable, yet resilient against the threats from climate change? So for those regular listeners, welcome back. You would have seen this is, in fact, the third in the series and the final part. But before we begin, we do just want to run a quick kind of poll to find out who's tuned in today, whether you're from which organization you're from, local government, state government, federal government, academia, industry, or other, and also where you are located: United States, Canada, South, Central America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Hopefully there's a few of us from Team Europe, and also your business sector as well. So if you could answer the demographic poll, that would be great. So in the last edition, for those of you who tuned in, we were fortunate enough to be joined by Dave Johnson, who's from the Southern Nevada Water Authority, who gave real an insight into how Las Vegas is building in resilience into its water strategy, especially considering the fluctuating seasonal population. But today we are moving the focus south, and we're pleased to include a Latin American perspective from a new star guest speaker. So André Salcedo is a former CEO of major Brazilian utility SABESP, and he led the company through its privatization process and also implemented a major turnaround between 2023 and 2024 and is here to share the story. So André, thanks very much for joining us. And we're also pleased to welcome back Will Sarni, the practice lead for water and nature at Earth Finance, and also Cecília Correia, who is a senior water solutions manager from Bentley Water Infrastructure Solutions. So great to see you again, Will and Cecília. And of course, we want this session to be interactive. So please use the Q&A box to ask your questions to our speakers, ask your comments, even thoughts you might have or observations. There's nothing worse than looking at the Q&A box and it's empty and there's tumbleweed. So please don't let that happen. Please put in your questions and we'll make sure to get through them and put them to the right speakers. So before we kickstart the session, why don't we look at the results from the poll just to see who is in the room? So we can see quite a large portion from the United States, a few from South Central America, Europe as well, about 30%, not too many from Africa and Asia as well. In terms of our business sectors, a mix between transportation, public works authority, sustainability, and other. And in terms of the municipality population size served, the majority is over 100,000. And we're still quite early on into the webinar, so I'm sure more people are going to be joining to get those numbers up as well. So hopefully our speakers are now on the webinar. If we can maybe, the first question I want to kind of ask is if we can kind of gaze into the future if we can gaze into our crystal balls and really imagine the most perfectly designed utopia city, okay, where everything works, every system, every process, every government department, every private company, everything works perfectly, right? It's quite perhaps hard to imagine in the world we live in. But let's go to there to start with, this utopia vision. And I want to ask our speakers to really give us their vision of what role they see digital and AI playing in that. So maybe, Will, we could start with you. Hopefully, we now have all our speakers joined. Thank you, André, Cecília, and in fact, whilst we just allow Will some time to join, Cecília, you look poised. Why don't you kick off?
Sure. Everyone can hear. Oh, Will is here. Do you want to get started, Will, or should I?
I defer to you. It's your call. I was struggling with technology, Celia. So.
Okay, so you're struggling with the future already.
Oh, well, always. Well, why don't you go first, and I'll jump in after you. How's that?
That's good. Okay, so I think because we're talking about, what the future would look like, I think to get started, we need to plan it. So at this moment, we are all the work that we are doing are basically going in the direction of the future and how it will look. But I think that in terms of the cities, the most important thing is that it has a human central focus on. So, and this means that it needs to become more water-wise. So I think that technology will be needed to really enable this interoperability that will allow the connectivity of all the systems. I mean, all the city infrastructure is connected today. So in the future, I think water will be incorporated in a certain way that people won't even notice. I mean, that would be the beauty of the future. Today, because people have access to water, for the people who have access to water, you see that there is some lack of awareness sometimes, unless something bad happens. And so sometimes people say, people just notice water when we actually don't have water or we have disasters happening. We expect that with time, we won't have that much, or potentially it should decrease, meaning if we're doing things right, that the AI and the technology will really support this interoperability of the different systems that need to come live. And the other day, someone was talking to me, it will be a huge task to actually have a digital twin for cities, for everything. And I said, is it like this, or is it that the future technology will allow to connect all these digital twins for the different areas, depending on the value that it needs to create? This, just like today we use our phones, and when we are in a car, we can still use our music that is on the phone. We get home and we have our smart lighting, for example, so we connect to all these systems. So it's the connectivity that is still not here today, for example, but that I expect, at least, that in the future it is there, so that people can actually really have a city that considers the safety of the people, but also the security of water that is there for them.
Thanks, Cecília. So obviously interoperability is a key thing. So systems that are connected, and then interesting how you mentioned, because I think we'll come on to the topic of digital twin later on, but it's almost like multiple digital twins of different elements, right? That are kind of connected. And I guess the main thing there is what people need access to at different stages, right? So if they are taking their family out near to water, they'll want to know a kind of digital twin of the health of that particular water. But great points to kickstart. Thank you. We'll kind of come back to some of those issues as well. So Will, now, yeah, give us kind of your follow-up. If you could look into the Sarni crystal ball, into the future of this utopia that doesn't quite exist at the moment. We're a little way off, right? How do you see it in terms of water, cities, and that intersection with digital and AI?
So I keep the crystal ball on my desk, Tom, so very handy. We talked about this previously in these conversations, that analog is just really not an option anymore. And in a world that's rapidly changing due to climate change, increasing demand, expectations from the workforce and civil society, we need to move rapidly to embracing digital technologies. And, I would also say that, we should not limit ourselves in terms of the power of digital and how it can connect civil society to key stakeholders and infrastructure in a very different way. So, I view it as a couple of things: democratizing access to data and actionable information. That's really where we're going. And I don't think we really can appreciate at this moment in time the impact that that will have. And if you start to provide information to civil society, their expectations and their communications back to a utility or, government and so on is going to change. And, hopefully influence public policy to be relevant for where we're at right now. And then also with respect to digital, and again, I believe we talked about this, digital technology is an enabler. So suddenly you can start to truly deliver decentralized, extreme decentralized water systems with a level of assurance that, we expect from centralized systems. So we need to, I think, view digital transformation much more broadly. And, Cecília, and, you brought this up before, and André, we talked about it when we were preparing for this, but, the power of digital with respect to the workforce is absolutely enormous. And how do you manage that digital transformation to ensure that no one gets left behind? And it is actually a very powerful tool for the workforce. So, my take on where we're at, and also, the future is here. I quote William Gibson routinely. And, once a little bit further in the conversation, we'll touch on, well, who's doing it right? Who has leapfrogged to a place where we all want to be?
Yeah, the full quote is the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet, right? I didn't misquote that. So I think a key part of what you mentioned there was democratizing access to data and information can really help people to, one, be connected to water, appreciate water more, but also maybe have a better relationship with even utilities as well. So the cultural side we'll definitely come on to a bit further down the line, particularly when we hear from André as well. So André, thank you for joining us here as a former CEO of SABESP, and obviously the transformation over the couple of years from 2023 to 2024, we'll go through in a bit more detail. But before we do, because I think part of what your role was to look into the future, right? And think about what could this organization become and how can we get there? So given with that experience behind you, if you were to look even further into the future at this utopian city that we are collectively creating and brainstorming now, how can you go further? What's the kind of the connection between water, digital, and AI there? Sorry, André,
I was on mute.
There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, for the introduction. Thanks, Bentley, and for the invitation through Cecília. Thank you very much. I hope that webinar gets handy for everybody when they come to see it. Basically, in Brazil, we're still lagging when you think about the access on both water and sewage structures. So our utopia, in a sense, maybe it's something like where Europe and developed countries are right now, and we can see that utopia number 2 coming a little bit further. So when I took the stage at the company, we have 2 main goals. One was to make the company more efficient and more integrated, and I can go through that sense when you think about data and forecasting and budgeting and planning, and also lead a company to a privatization process where the company becomes leave behind the state as a controlling shareholder and become a corporation as a privately owned entity. In that sense, what we had as a forecast in the first phase is really to bring access to treated and potable water to the whole population for all 375 municipalities that we provide services, comprising 28 million persons. So it's roughly a country when we think about the size of SABESP. The amount of investments that we forecasted to reach the full access to both water and sewage, proper sewage collecting and treatment, soars around $12 billion in 5 years period. We aim to reach it by 2029. So that was the planning. And that is the basic. It's not a utopia. For Brazilian standards, it's utopia, but it's in the overall sense, it's not utopia. So that is our first phase. So this first cycle of 5 years aims on really universalizing the services, providing the full access to the population on basic sanitary services. And when we think about the second stage, from 2030 to 35, then comes automation, reducing the levels of non-revenue water, really creating systems that are integrated and can respond to the challenges that we are living today, and we expect them to be more challenging in the future, such as climate change, floods, droughts, the behavior, the overall behavior of the cities. So to accomplish that second stage and the third stage, because we have a contract that will go up to 2060. So we have cycles of 5 years of investments that have been forecasted since today. So the first 5 years is aiming on universalizing the services, getting everybody to be under our umbrella of water and sewage treatment. Second one, automation and efficiency. And the third one, and so on until 2060, is basically making the systems more efficient and lower losses and providing good cost and quality to the clients. And to reach that, we basically, on the company level, we have to change the culture of the company, aiming to think about the company in a more integrated way. We used to have what we call business units in the company. So we have for each groups of cities a head that is basically the CEO used to be the CEO of that particular region, and decided which investment to do, how to manage the company on that area. And that led us to perceived efficiency on that level. But when you see the whole company, it's overall inefficient, because you have different heads or business units responsible heading different ways. So you have an inefficient capital allocation, a lack of a digital overview of the company. So the first thing that we did beginning of last year was to really create a sense of coordination, and what we called one single SABESP, one single company to see everything. So the planning, the forecast, investments, the digital strategy, how should we combine different data to support a decision-making process. We have a lot of systems working in parallel. That was a big mess. So we went through a master plan of information technology to see where we were, where we want to be, what we want to do, and what is the path to really combine those systems or rationalize those systems. We used to have over 100 systems running in parallel. So we are reducing these numbers to something around 40 to 50. So we have more efficient data harvesting, better data storage, and really data management, data governance. So we can use this structure to support the management, to see what are the struggles, the bottlenecks of the company, and see to the future. Because in overall, if you can see the past, present, and future, I was talking to the Cecília previously. Basically, in a sense, in the past, the company simply managed its internal structure. So I want to build the best water or wastewater structure to process it, And basically the data that I was used to look for and analyze were the data of the efficiency of the plants, the treatment plants, and the forecast of the clients. Now we have a lot of data, climate, the pattern of the population, environmental challenges, and we have to combine this together. So we need to figure out how we can be efficient on really bringing those data to the table and reacting to that. And in the future, we should plan for things that we are not used to have in our present, such as big droughts, big floods, climate change. Just to give an example, and I'll end after that, basically, the metropolitan region of the city of São Paulo comprises around 20 million clients. And the water availability for those people, those families, is lower than the ones that we see in deserts or very dried geographies. So as the cities grow, those cities been growing, the water sources, they are being more scarce, and they are not sufficient to provide water in a secure way to those populations. So innovation, reducing leakage, and also trying to be more efficient on managing, let's say, pressure on the network is paramount to really ensure that the water will be on taps, the people will have water to drink in the future. So that's very challenging when you think about 20 million clients living in a circle that goes to less than 10 kilometers, or less than 20 kilometers radius. So it's very, very challenging when you think about the metropolitan region of São Paulo. It's a very dense area, very a lot of people living in the same area without the proper, without the sufficient water to serve them.
André, thanks so much. I mean, I think it's quite an impressive when you look at the numbers, right? 12 billion over 5 years, and then you mentioned it's a 3-stage process: universal access to automation, to then over 5-year period increase efficiencies up to 2060. But I think one of the lines you used was quite interesting, where the very phrase utopia is quite subjective, right? What might seem as utopia for us, actually, if you look at less developed utilities, is probably where a lot of more developed utilities currently are. So that was super interesting. But I'd like to maybe kind of just bring in Will and then Cecília, just to kind of reflect on what you've heard there from André in terms of the need to really make sure that the digital strategy of the organization is connected with the kind of the business and the overarching strategy, because there was so much to that to sort of unpack. But maybe, Will, you could kind of reflect on that.
Yeah, I'm really glad André brought this up. Technology is terrific, but unless you embrace technology, deploy technology as part of a strategy, it's going to fail, and you'll be spending a lot of money, and it'll set you back in terms of adoption and changing the workforce and societies. So, yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize this: digital transformation is a strategy that supports a business strategy, whether it's a utility or industry, whatever it may be. So what's your business strategy? How does digital tech fit into that? And what is your transformation plan? Which is, creating an organization that I would say embraces failure and recognizes that it's going to be, lumpy in terms of adoption. It's a learning culture. So how do you bake in a culture where people want to learn? So, that's the sequence. We shouldn't be jumping to, digital tech is great and it's going to go really smoothly. No, it's really not, because you're dealing with humanity, people, and people need to have a culture that gives them permission to learn and to embrace technology and not be afraid of it. And in particular now, because, the rise of AI, I think that sort of conjures up all sorts of, images and negative thoughts and so on, but, it could be an incredibly powerful tool. So I really agree with André in terms of strategy first, culture then technology, and supporting that, in the organization, whatever the organization might be. And I would also add that, it applies to civil society. If suddenly you are going to democratize access to data and information, you have to inform the public that suddenly they have a tool and they have power, and there's a way to process this change that's happening. So, my 2 cents.
Well, thanks, Phil. I think your question, what is your transformational plan, and then making sure digital is part of that, as opposed to rushing into digital technologies and pilots to kind of seek short-term wins. Yeah, embracing failure. I mean, maybe that's a topic we can maybe pick up later on as well. But certainly I'd love to get maybe Andre's thoughts on that if we just put that on the shelf for later on. But Cecília, give some sort of commentary and flavor then, following Will and Andre, just on SABESP's kind of transformational long-term plan. They're thinking 2060, and actually how digital's a part of that, and maybe reflect on that and what you see elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot on what André commented, but I think the interesting point that he mentioned was that they started with the challenges. And I think many times we fail because we start with, the solutions, which is wrong, as we can see. And the adoption of technology, for example, was not the goal. The goal was to become more efficient. And so they realized this, by putting the challenges before. And I think one of the interesting things, and I just mentioned that on the post that I did yesterday, it's, if it's not ambitious enough, then it will not be transformational. It will just be a commodity. So hearing André, that was, the CEO at the time, I think you can see that it will become transformational when you have, a CEO that can talk about the topics with so much in depth. And he's not, it's not just a technical person talking about a topic and the other. And this means that, top management really need to lead this transformation that needs to be done when you need to focus on solving some of the challenges that you have. Because I think if the leaders really believe in the benefits and then understand the value, it will be much easier to convince the people. So many times we hear that it will be too hard for driving transformation because people will not adopt, but people matter, and they're very capable of doing many of the things that you ask them to. It's just that sometimes they don't believe that their leaders are actually, leading this transformation, and that they believe. But I think what we have seen here is that management was leading that transformation, and that is maybe what made everyone got more engaged and going along with the process as well, and therefore the success of it.
Very good. So one of the messages is to be super ambitious, right? So Andre, to sort of come back when you were, I guess, working with the management team across SABESP, you mentioned 20 million people. This is a huge, transformational shift across a big operation. So where did you think at the time it was maybe too ambitious, or what was the kind of the guiding, like, what did you look to think, right, this is where we've got to be, this is our ambition, and we're going to do everything in our power to kind of get there? Can you talk through kind of the vision of where you started on this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom, because basically I took the stage and the company was state-owned. So basically, the governor asked me to lead the company, and while they were analyzing and studying the privatization process, and basically I didn't know how long I'll have as a CEO to implement the strategy. So basically, what we drew was a strategy for the long term, and we tried to do our best to deliver the best solutions in the short term as we could, without major shifts in that size of company. Basically, it's not possible. You cannot make a new turn in a transatlantic, so you have to really lead the way, shift consistently in a direction that you really believe. It's quite particular. All the changes that we made were made in the beginning. So I created two specific cells directly linked to myself, to the CEO, that I really thought that it was transformational for the company. One was the ESG unit. The company didn't. That doesn't mean that the company didn't have activities linked to ESG. Basically, sanitation company is ESG 100%, but the strategy was not something that was corporate. So I needed to develop and understand what the company was doing in the ESG agenda, identify the best practices, and really create a strategy for the ESG agenda, so that we can communicate to the people, to the investors, to the community stakeholders, what we were doing, why we were doing, and where we wanted to reach in terms of KPIs, of results, and so on. So basically, that was the strategy on ESG agenda, and we really created a lot of value over there. We identified a lot of practices that were not creating value, so were discontinued. We also found some practices that were small that we aimed to increase because it was powerful, such as dealing with communities, low-income people, programs specific for those people that didn't have money to pay for the water. How can we help them? And also, the company still has over 44,000 hectares under its management, and we are doing nothing to preserve, to generate value, carbon credits, monetize those things. So basically, there's a lot of value over there that can be created or obtained if you have a proper strategy. And the same I did on digital transformation. I created a unit linked to me so we can see the company as a whole and identify best practices that could be leveraged to the company level. One of those was the Integra 4.0. It was a pilot that started in a unit in the company that integrated operational view, financial view, and client perspective. So that is something that we should have on a company level. So we created a center of operations and started to really bring to that center all the information related to the operational units on both water and sewage and network management, combined with the client perspective. So what are the compliance? The water is not, there's a shortage in certain regions. How can we connect the client's perspective to our operational management so we can really reduce or improve the client experience when the client thinks about water? So that kind of transformation is part of what we did. We also made major shifts on all the positions, on the C-level position, the vice presidencies, so we can really link the company strategy. Because getting back to what Will was saying, when you think about a strategy, you have to think about the structure to really deploy the strategy, and then the people that should be in this structure to really enable and execute the day-to-day basis. So you have the structure, the people that will deliver the strategy. So we started shifting the strategy, aiming on clients, environment, and efficiency, and then we built the structure and brought the right people to deliver it. So it's a process, and we really have to touch the hearts. The people need to see the purpose of the change. Changing is always painful. It's not easy to change. It's easier. You can see that the change is needed, but it's easier when it is in the other place. So change the other guy, change the other units. I'm doing well. When the change comes to your chair, it's painful. So we have to give a purpose. Why are we changing? We're changing to provide better services. We're changing to increase our network, to really expand the company activity. So that is something that touched the heart of a staff that's been with the company for decades. So a lot of communications I used to have on a monthly basis. The last week of the month, I used to hold a webinar, a live to the employees. So I talked to them about what we were doing and where we want to be in the next month, in the next year. So everybody was hopefully in the same stage and seeing the same things, and knowing that they were not building a wall, but knowing that the wall is part of a church, and the church is beautiful and it's nice to be part of it.
So the communication internally is obviously critical to sort of bring the teams and obviously make sure the strategy is being adopted by everyone and they can see the sense of purpose and stuff. How important is it to not only communicate what you're doing, but also to make sure that those individuals feel like they're involved in it, or their ideas are welcomed, especially an organization of that size? Was it a two-way kind of webinar, right, where people could give feedback and actually updates?
The first ones didn't have feedback because first I want to give the message. Then I started to open to question. Then the webinar shift to local events with big audience, such as the company has several auditoriums where we can hold up to 100 or 500 people in the same place. So basically, we kind of combined different types of events. I used to visit the units spread around the state, so I can hear from them. Because not only the transformation was taking place on the digital perspective, on the cultural perspective, but also the company was being privatized. And the privatization is always traumatic for the staff. So I wanted to bring something that I really believe that the privatization was going to be good and a big opportunity for the staff to improve their skills and really evolve in the career. So I went to all the places to talk to them. I used to make a speech, then hear from them their doubts, their questions, and we follow with a lunch or grab something to eat where we can have a standing crowd. And I was along with them to talk about what we were talking, the process, and being very honest and transparent through all the process. The governor himself participated in some of those meetings, so the governor could give his perspective on all the potential of the company, all the potential the company could have after the privatization. So it was very transparent. I'm very proud of what we built. It's a very different privatization process from everything that we've seen in Brazil so far. A very communicative process, a very transparent process with a lot of room from people from the company, unions to position themselves and really make the process more robust and more aligned with the perspectives that everybody wants. We know that the unions don't want the company to be privatized, but that set aside, they were able to contribute on how we can do that privatization better and in a more smooth way to reflect the needs of the employees, the state, the investors, the contract that we need to deploy the services, and that was very unique when we see a different process that were in place before our case.
Well, as you mentioned, change is often painful, right? And people are habitual by nature. So I think when you're going through this transformational strategy, and then you've also got privatization, clear, sort of transparent communications are going to be absolutely critical to make sure that everyone knows what's going on and they're a part of it as well. So, Will.
Yeah, listening to André reminded me that right now we're talking about organizations that adopt digital technologies. We also need to be mindful that the startups or scale-ups in the digital space need to understand that also, in that has to be baked into their value proposition. They need to have the capacity to deal with the pain, as André said, in terms of digital technology adoption. So, there are two sides of the coin. The startup that is looking to get into the marketplace needs to understand it's not just about the technology. It is about everything else that moves as part of this digital transformation. And, people don't like change. So how does a startup make it easier, take the friction out of it?
Very good. Yeah, I'd love to get maybe later on André's views as kind of part of the strategy, what SABESP did in terms of maybe working with startups or accelerating those companies, but we'll come to that later. We have got a question that's come in. I just want to make sure we give a shout out. So thanks to Paul Bordia. Paul's asked, it will be nice to know from the speakers how best the digital transformation and digital twin approach can address source water restoration and management and water reuse infrastructure in the near future. So maybe Cecília, do you want to take a stab at that one? I can sort of paraphrase the question. So how digital transformation and the digital twin approach can address source water restoration and management and also water reuse infrastructure in the future.
Well, I think it's always, I don't think it's only about the future, it's also today. So it's all about, providing clean and safe water to people. And so when it comes to the challenges that we are facing and that André also mentioned about, it's water scarcity. So that's why you need to reuse water. And then when it comes to floods, it's, maybe we can make use of that, so much water because it usually affects, places where they are not used to having a lot of water. They may be even having problems with water scarcity. So I think digital twins are fundamental to prove, to test, to plan and prepare. So meaning that, would you reconstruct a city or think of or rethinking of many of the water usage or without testing, without proving? It doesn't make sense. So you do have the technology today. In the old days, you were constructing and hoping that it would, not go wrong. Then later on, you would have these physical models, scaled, so that you could test some things. Today, they don't make sense anymore because you actually have data. You can use virtual reality to identify and see, okay, if I'm reusing more water, if I'm actually saving more water, then I will be saving more energy, then I will be decreasing my carbon footprint. So there are a lot of things involved, which shows, for example, the need to use the technology to enable and to understand all of this. And also in terms economics, it's a lot of savings because if you don't have to fail, I'm not sure what you're going to talk about to fail, right? But we usually say that, fail is first attempt in learning, right? So I do think that we can actually leapfrog some of these, we have learned, right? So we can actually leapfrog and we don't need to all go through the same problems to actually improve and build a better future, I guess.
Thanks, Cecília. So sort of, as you mentioned in the past, we just didn't have the digital tools and the data available. It was constructing and then testing and finding out, right? But now we're way ahead of that. We can predict and almost find a digital replica of that asset we're building to then find out how it's going to operate in real world conditions. Exactly. So we haven't forgotten about that topic of failure and making mistakes, which we will come on to, I promise. But first of all, let's just get André, your comments on that question then in terms of digital transformation and digital twin approach when it comes to water reuse infrastructure in the near future.
Well, first, I think it's a must, not nice to have, but we need to think about the cyclicality of water companies. So again, thinking about the past, basically what we see in Brazil, not only SABESP but overall water and sanitation systems. They were designed to basically treat the sewage in the way that the law states you should treat it, and that's it. So when we think about the next stage, and that's where the digital transformation and the tools such as digital twins combined on what we have is how can we transform the actual structures on structures that are more aligned with the needs that the society demands us to have, such as circularity. How can we make those systems more efficient? When we think about wastewater and sewage, not only producing recycled water, reuse water to different uses, but also thinking about the organic matter, the sludge. How can we make profit of it, make the company more efficient on a financial perspective, and not only sending this sludge to landfills, which is data to end. And how can we generate energy, for example, with biogas, transform biogas in biomethane, or even using this energy, the heat produced by the energy that you might be producing in this plant to dry the sludge and reduce the volume that's going to be transported to landfills, and even better, transform this dried sludge into input for cement companies to produce cement, or even other companies that need heat to do their business, or even getting even further, produce fertilizers from the sludge. So those digital tools, the digital transformation, can help you design and simulate which solution is best for the existing plants. Basically, what we need to do, we don't have many new plants being constructed in big scale. We have big ones already exist, but they are outdated when you think about the challenge that we're facing right now. Not only the climate change, that we need to again update the structures to be more resilient, but also the environmental friendly structures that really reflect and reduce the impact of human beings living so densely together in a city. So that's one of the projects that we started in SABESP, is to rethink the role of the sewage treatment plants, that I decided to call them life recycling plants, because basically that's what we do in those units. We transform life. We get some wastewater and sewage, and we transform to something that can be really used again and restart at the starting point of something such as agriculture, industry, and also recharge water streams and water basins with recycled water instead of doing something that's not environmentally friendly. So basically that's it. I think it's the digital twins comes as an add-on to really understand the structure that the company has and how this structure can be more efficient, more environmental friendly, and more resilient to the changes that we are going to suffer in the future.
Very good. Thanks, André. I think I've never heard them called life recycling plants before, but I like it. I've heard resource.
When you say that you work in a life recycling plant than in a sewage plant.
It's yeah, but maybe a slight play on the introduction, right? I work at a life recycling plant, but I think you mentioned there the connection between digital and circular economy and really simulating the best use of resources to see what additional infrastructure can be built. So yeah, thanks for that. Will.
Yeah, André, you bring up a really important point. Language matters. So if we're going to actually move towards reuse, recycling, and viewing, wastewater treatment plants as an asset as opposed to a liability, we really need to change the language to professionals, but also the layperson. And wastewater treatment plants as factories, as an asset that you can tap into. And you touched on a number of things that really make that point. So yeah, I just think that's really key if we're going to change how we do things.
That's it.
If I can add, that in Portugal, they call these big wastewater treatment plants, they call it water factories. Like, welcome to the water factory. Like, they're producing water.
I love it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think Singapore's done a pretty good job of language, right, with new water in terms of recycling wastewater through to indirect reuse, but actually a product as well. So very good. So I did promise we were going to talk about this topic of failure, right? And Will, you mentioned innovation is pretty lumpy, right? It's not straightforward. Doing things new don't often work out. But within, I think, let's maybe start with you, André, within this kind of cultural transformation that you were going through, how did you sort of change, maybe, because I think particularly with a public sector utility, right, when it comes to safety of drinking water, you cannot make mistakes, that's a given, but there's other areas of the innovation cycle before you get through to water quality where things don't often work out in processes or systems that you've maybe piloted. So talk us through how, as part of that SABESP journey, kind of maybe you engaged on the topic of making mistakes, or talk us through your thinking on that.
Yeah, it's wonderful how things can be tricky when you talk about innovation. It's a very fancy word. People like to talk about it, but basically, in Brazil, talking about our experience, state-owned entities, they have very small room to make mistakes because we have the law, we have the public ministry, audit courts, and all the society. They every time they think that if you're doing a mistake, you're doing that on purpose to hurt the wealth of the government and then so on, and they think you are a criminal and so on. So we need to have a process. What I liked, I used to work in an agricultural pharmaceutical company as a board member, and they had a process that I really liked. It is that you allocate resources in the opposite size of the risk of each stage. So if you have an idea that's just an idea, you have limited resources to that idea. So if you lose it, it's a small amount, not only of time of the people, but also financial results. As the idea gets more mature, you can have a higher budget. So we have these fencing stages. So once you go to the next stage, we receive an additional, let's say, grant or trust, so we can spend and enhance the credibility of the solution and go to the next phase. So you don't put a lot of money in something that's very riskier or is in a very immature state. So as things gets more mature, you are allowed to spend more money and more resources. So that's how I like to think on the governance, the cycle of how you manage innovation within a company. So everybody understands that innovation is needed. It's not an option. If you do not innovate, you will be lagging comparing to your competitors. You need to innovate. And in a company that provides a very basic service, such as water, you cannot innovate putting substances in the water that will jeopardize the quality. So you also have to understand the business and the type of service that you provide, so you can innovate in other ways. One of the things that we started doing at SABESP, and it's what we call open innovation. So it's really open the gates of the company to startups to learn from us what we are doing, understand our pains, our bottlenecks, and think about solution. We were thinking about, we're still in the shelves and draws about creating a corporate venture capital fund with other companies in Brazil, so we can really have a manager, a general partner that will look to the market and try to understand and identify potential suppliers to Brazilian water and sewage companies that could bring solutions, let's say for sludge, for energy efficiency, leakage reduction, non-revenue water reduction. So those are the main topics that have been on our heads when I think about innovation. So general efficiency, reducing leakages and water losses, and reduce non-revenue water, and also energy efficiency on the process, and also in the purchase of energy. So basically that's what we did, what we were doing by the time. And I think there's a lot of room for innovation in specifically in Brazilian water utility market. The companies, they are basically engineering companies. I'm an engineer, so I can talk that freedom of speech. I know Cecília is also an engineer, so basically it's a mindset to be build structures, operate structures, and that's it. That's efficiency, and they've been doing that quite well. But when I think about innovation, it's much more it's more software than hardware. So we need to combine these solutions and really embed them, this culture, in the water and sewage companies, so we can really have a better relationship with the clients, We are not an engineering company, we're a service company, and the service provides service to people. So we need to understand the needs of the people, how they understand the quality of our services, and what's the future. Again, utopically, what we should be providing 10 years from now. What kind of service should we think that we should provide 10 years from now? It's just water and sewage, or it's more than that. It's resilience, is trust, is security. What is the main asset that we're going to provide to the society 10 years from now?
I think that's a really good question, right? It goes beyond the service. You mentioned resilience, it's health, isn't it? It's so much more than just the piped water and wastewater. But yeah, thanks, André. Interesting to hear about the view on the governance of innovation and as well as the kind of resources that are allocated depending on the maturity of that idea as well. So thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. We've got another question that I want to make sure we answer. Maybe Will and Cecília, you could take a stab at this one. Thanks to Eric McCauley from Utah. She's asked, Eric has said, how do you think water for ecosystem services and the benefits of water for the environment can be captured digitally? If we allow the ecosystems and rivers, riparian corridors and wetlands to diminish, it is hard to recapture those values and services. Thank you, Eric. So yeah, maybe Will, if you want to take a stab at that one.
Yeah, this sort of goes back to a previous question and some of the comments about, what are the digital opportunities in a watershed, healthy watersheds, that's something that is shared by both the public and the private sector utilities. And then, what are healthy ecosystems and, ensuring that nature, it doesn't continue to be declining in terms of, biodiversity and so on. So I see digital as playing a really critical role in that, with remote sensing, on the ground sensors and so on. And we need to go back to really acknowledging that, water comes from a watershed and there are ecosystems that thrive in that watershed that are critical and connects to both, the utilities and the public sector and the private sector. And definitely a longer conversation.
Cecília, let's if you could maybe comment on that about the capturing the benefits of water for the environment digitally. I think that's a really interesting question. Yeah.
I think this is a topic that could generate a webinar on its own. Because André was saying that we were really good, constructing, and we expected that we constructed, so it will be strong. We have realized, and even with recent events of floods and other things like droughts, where we were using water, expecting it to be there forever. And one of the things that we realized is that we basically failed to understand the importance of the natural infrastructure that was there, with rivers, with streams, with green areas, with permeable soils. So what we're seeing today is that we are shifting, and even in cities that are really strongly populated, you can see that people are changing. So if you are in a big city, you can see that the high buildings, they're constructing green areas. So one of the things that the technology can actually do is to support, as we said before, to test these solutions. So you see more and more sponge cities, for example, which was a concept coming from China. And today you see that more and more cities are adopting that because they're taking the potential of their watershed, because I usually say that, people tend to think about a watershed as something, far away with nice green area, but a city is in a watershed. I mean, all of us live in watersheds, no matter how impervious they are. And so a city and a park can be a storage tank if, it's raining too much. So the technology can actually help, simulate like what will happen if I have a certain amount of rain, for example. How can I make use of it? And maybe storage that water, and maybe clean it and reuse it, for example, for irrigation. So I think the technology, again, and innovation will come to basically understand every drop of water in how we can reuse. So the circularity of things. One of the things that André mentioned that was very interesting, he mentioned the one SABESP. So if we think about the one water, I mean, it's all about, right? It's all about circularity. It's all about the connectivity between all the systems, that they are not separated, they're not siloed. And if you think about, the second webinar we talked about, and I said, if I can use one word for the past, present, and future, the past would be siloed, the today is integrated, but tomorrow will be connected. So when we talk about the cities of the future, if they will have a more natural-based solutions, technology will really help give that big step to improve the life of our cities.
Amazing. Thank you, Cecília.
If I may just add one thing, Tom, here, on a financial perspective. If you don't measure the results, it's impossible to capture value. So when you think about harvesting data from water basins, watersheds, the impacts of what the companies are doing, negative or positively, on those systems. If you want to monetize through carbon credits or use it to lever or issue green bonds, blue bonds, you need to have a very good systems of really measurements. So if you measure, you can improve. If you improve, you can show you're improving, and how the value added by this improvement can be reflected on the company's balance sheet, or how the company access markets and so on. So it's very important to have trustworthy data and very robust systems of information, so you can really show that the investment that's being done is really generating the additional value that's supposed to.
Very good. Yeah, and I guess generating the data to sort of quantify and demonstrate the success of what you've invested in across the whole operation as well. So very good. In the interest of time, we're running a couple of minutes over, but I just want to say, a big thanks to André, to Will, and Cecília for joining this third and final discussion. Cecília, you linked actually nicely back to an earlier episode where we talked about sponge cities. So those webinars are available on demand. So please, if you this was the first one you turned up to, we've got 2 previous in the series you can go back and watch. So please make sure you do. And I think hopefully this has just given everyone a bit of food for thought when it comes to the art of the possible. I think certainly, André, the journey you've been through and that transformation across the business and the digital side, and actually creating a separate ESG unit within the utility is definitely something new that I've heard of. So I think you guys were definitely thinking of what is possible up to 2060 when you were building this out. So kudos to you. But yeah, thanks to everyone tuning in and for the questions as well. And keep an eye out on those previous episodes, and as well as a big thank you to Bentley Systems for sponsoring the series as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.